name is Vina, aka Miss WC Reader, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my February mid-month wrap-up. So I didn't think I was initially going to film a February mid-month wrap-up because I thought I was going to be in the throes of work and be too busy. But I ended up being able to do it because work, like the start date got pushed back by a week, which I was not mad about because the weather this week was terrible. And I didn't want to have to drive to work in the snow because I'm having to go back to in-person work in the office, which I'm not looking forward to. So it gave me more opportunity to read and also get some content in, which I'm also not mad about. So I did an Audible free trial and I did a KU free trial recently to help me read down some books on my TBR. And one of the books that I ended up reading during the Audible free trial was Coming Home, which is a novella by Kennedy Ryan. It is set in HBCU. Now, keep in mind, Kennedy Ryan did not attend an HBCU. She went to UNC Chapel Hill, which is a PWI. I know some people who went to HBCUs don't like when people who didn't go to HBCUs write that experience. That's within their right. I thought it was actually pretty obvious here that reading it that she didn't go to an HBCU. I didn't go to an HBCU either. I've attended some homecomings at an HBCU with older people who did go to an HBCU. So I've been to Dell State's homecoming. I've been to Hampton's homecoming. I'm trying to be up at somebody's homecoming this fall, hopefully. Because I'm like, it's been a long time. And I actually do miss those trips. But I was curious about this one because everybody was rating it so highly. We follow two friends who were friends, at the HBCU, and 20 some odd years later they're reconnecting. Our male main character has a grown daughter who is up for homecoming queen, and he has been kind of absentee most of her life because he's just been so consumed with work and trying to provide for her. And I think that storyline was too much for such a short space. She was trying to do too much with that because she wanted him to connect with her over the weekend and rebuild this relationship because he was kind of jealous that she has a closer relationship to her stepdad. Well, you were never around. He was consistently around. And a 3-hour novella is not the space to try and do that type of storyline, especially because it's only happening over a couple of days. It's homecoming weekend. So I felt like that was very forced, and that took up a lot of space from the actual romance. The actual romance was nothing to write home about. It's second chance. They're older now. They missed their opportunity when they were younger. They had a kiss, but they didn't go anywhere past that. He was about to be with somebody else or with someone else. I can't remember clearly. Around the time he graduated, he found out his future wife was pregnant and he was away on assignment for a job. So he's been through a whole marriage and everything. There was a lot going on here. I didn't like the male main character's POV. I don't know if it was just the stilted writing and the narration that I just couldn't click with. On top of that, I feel like he just kept telling us, I went to an HBCU. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm so glad I went to an HBCU. And I don't feel like we needed that. Everybody in the book went to an HBCU. We are on an HBCU campus. You don't have to sell me on the idea that it's important to go to an HBCU. And I would hope that's not what the alumni are talking about the entire time that they're at homecoming. Yeah, I'm so happy I went to the school, blah, blah, blah. But they don't need to sell each other on the importance of going to an HBCU because they all went. There was even, at one point, they kind of took a swipe at the people who attended a PWI, but were there enjoying homecoming. And I'm just wait. Again, I don't know if that's a thing that the people who go who are the alumni of these HBCUs do. But I just felt like we just got reminded way too much the importance of attending an HBCU when we already know that because everybody here attended one. It would also have been nice to have more actual events surrounding the homecoming because we didn't really get to hear anything about the game. Halftime show is like the big thing. Like bigger than the actual just like football part is the halftime show. Like the celebrity sightings, you never know who you're gonna see at like the game, and we didn't really get any of that. It would have been cool to see more of the events because we like breezed through the whole homecoming game to go to an after party so they could hook up, and I don't really feel like they had strong enough chemistry either. So this just wasn't a great novella. I feel like she just tried to do a lot and didn't really succeed. I ended up reading One Lucky Subscriber by Kelly Garrett. This one I had sitting on my Kindle for like since October actually because it was a prime read. And I don't know why I had it sitting that long because it was like 40 pages long. This one, it is kind of like Mr. Beast fan fiction. That's kind of like the best way to describe it. There's a little bit of a mystery surrounding like this viral stunt at the mall, and it was an okay read. Like I can't say it was just like so good. I kind of struggle with these Amazon original short stories. I just never feel like they're long enough to fully hold my attention. By the time I was into this one, it was almost over. So I just don't have too much to say about it. It was like an okay quick read. Also this month, one of my favorite authors dropped. Synethia Williams dropped Frenemies with Benefits, which is the third book in the Peachtree Cove series, which is like a series that I've been enjoying. This was I think might be one of my favorite books. It's between this and book 2 from this series. It might be one of my favorite books in the series. I still prefer Jackson Falls. Like that's my favorite series by her. But Peachtree Cove is cute too. I think this one upped the drama too. Like we had some drama in book 1, we had in book 2, but this one like really upped the ante. And this follows Tracy, whose story has been building over the course of the books. So while you don't necessarily have to read these in order, I think it kind of helped because there are pieces that carried over. Like you see where Tracy's husband was cheating on her and she started like to suspect things, and Brian is following her around. He's like, I'm concerned with the way you're acting. And then you see like her discovering her husband cheating on her and her freaking out and like the whole town knowing, and it just like all blew up. So by the time we get to this book, she is divorced and she's just trying to build up her inn. Now that the town has like the best small town designation, she wants to bring in more business. Brian is still working with her doing at the like as a contractor for the inn, and she is kind of hot and cold with him. Like they try to be friends, but I wouldn't necessarily say they're frenemies. They just don't always get along. He ends up being someone that she can lean on a little bit because he's also recently divorced. His wife cheated on him, so they can kind of bond over being cheated on and growing up in this town, everybody talking about you. And his mom is like warning him like, you have a lot of baggage, you don't need to get involved with this woman if you're not going to be serious because you might end up hurting her. And his ex-wife is like waiting in the wings because it's one of those situations where they've been like hooking up on and off, and he's trying to put a stop to it and just move forward, and she still wants him even though she has a new husband. And so you have that mess going on. Tracy, she has basically been with her husband since high school, so now he cheated on her, he got the new woman pregnant, Um, they've moved on, and she's just like, okay, now how do I move on? Because it's like, she's like, I did everything for him. I don't know how to even please myself because I was so used to putting his pleasure first. So now she's really trying to take control of her life and do things for her. Um, the cover is interesting because she has braids on the cover. She does not have braids in the book. In the one of like the big things she does is she decides to get locks in the book because like her husband didn't really care for that like that hairstyle, and she wanted to do something different with her hair for her. So like I find it very strange that this is an illustrated cover and they have braids on the cover when she has locks. And I don't know, like, if initially she's gonna have, I don't feel like she was gonna have her do braids initially because like braids come out, locks are like a permanent thing. So that was a little strange, but I thought that was a great moment where like she's showing like, okay, I'm going to change my hair, I'm going to dress differently, I'm going to like have an honest conversation about what I like in the bedroom. Like her friends really push her to open up, which the friendship here was great because we see like the friendship throughout each book, and things just really came together with how they support each other, like even though they're all kind of in different spaces in their life. So I love that too. Overall, this is just like a pretty enjoyable small town romance. I will say, like, even though we have good conversations about sex, you don't get as much like on page as the other two and even some of her other ones, but I still enjoyed the writing here. And so as always, Cynthia Williams is pretty much a must read for me. Like I said, I was trying to read down my TBR, and I've had these toxic things on my shelf for quite some time. I was supposed to read this last fall and ended up not getting to it. So I was like, okay, in February, it's definitely getting read. And so I kind of did a hybrid read where I was listening to it, but I was also reading with my eyeballs. And then I just ended up listening to it more because this one was hard to get through. It was a little rough. I was also buddy reading it, so one of my friends had bought a bunch of Rachel Howes Hall books, and they were like, okay, I'm gonna read through them. And one of the ones they had gotten was These Toxic Things, and I'm like, well, I've read a bunch of Rachel books, and I'm trying to see how I feel about her as a writer because I wasn't impressed by the other ones I read. And I'm like, I have this one to read, and I have the last one to read. We'll get to the last one in a little bit. So we were reading this one together, and it was pretty painful. First of all, the pacing was so bad. I never got thriller from this. So the premise sounded interesting at first. We are following this young woman. She's 24, and she works as like this digital archivist. They make these memory boxes for people, like a digital memory box you can share with your family. In theory, it sounded cool. The way they were explaining it here and they were going on and on and on, it actually ended up sounding really boring. Um, Basically, Mickey is working with this woman. Her name is Nadia, and she ends up dying, like getting killed. Like they're not sure what happened while she's supposed to make this memory box for her. Mind you, she's only met this lady like once or twice, but she is so invested. Like, I have to see this project through because she already paid for it. I'm like, but nobody's asking for this memory box, so why do you need to do it? So that just felt like a very flimsy way to tie her into the mystery. But also, this is a thriller. There's supposed to be a sense of urgency. We're supposed to try and see the mystery through. And we didn't really have that. In the meantime, like, there's somebody stalking Mickey. That was actually completely disconnected from this plot. That was the crazy part. Like, there was simultaneously two different stories of killers going on, and there was no overlap. I was so confused, and that was so frustrating for me and my friend, especially like you keep getting hit in the head with who it is too. As far as the situation with Nadia, none of that made sense. None of that made sense. It actually contradicts the first chapter, which, like, the first chapter was actually interesting. I'm like, it was some, like, and man, it started off like crazy right off the bat and then just went downhill. Um, it didn't make any sense at all. The person stalking Mickey was just so predictable, like very heavy-handed, very unnecessary. Like I didn't get it. And it made me notice that there's some things that Rachel loves to include in her book that are not necessarily done well, but she just loves to go to them because they're just easier to write and create drama. So there was two romances in here. Neither one of them were good. One of them was between Mickey and her coworker, her white coworker, and like there was no reason for them to be sleeping together at all whatsoever. No reason. It didn't connect to it, like it didn't affect the plot in any type of way. It just was unnecessary drama to drag out the story, and it wasn't done well. It's not like they had great chemistry. There would be long exposition in this book constantly that made no sense, that didn't move the plot, that had no effect. Like, I had a hard time paying attention because I'm like, you feel like you're getting hit with all this stuff that it's like, what is the purpose of this? But also you need to listen closely because you're like, maybe they might be dropping some tidbits in here that you need to pick up on later for the mystery aspect of the story. And no, like, there was a whole chapter in here, I kid you not, of just Mickey with her parents and her mom was making breakfast sandwiches. And we were getting like every action explained to us in detail. It was so painful. Because another thing too is like Mickey is supposed to be 24. She reads like she's like 17. She lives with her parents, but she lives like in a house, like a guest house on their property separate, so she can come and go as she pleases. She had wrecked her car, but they gave her a brand new car. And like, that's not the first time I've heard of that situation in California. Like, she's a pretty privileged girl. Like, she's the daughter of an accountant and a teacher. A lot of her family works in law enforcement. Like, she's a very privileged girl. But like, her mom making her breakfast every morning just felt very childish. Like, there's nothing wrong with living with your parents whatsoever. I'm currently living with my mom for now while I'm saving money. And my mom don't make me breakfast though. So like, that just felt very childish to me. And like, her parents are overly secretive about like the scar on her face, which also ties into the mystery, but it just felt so heavy-handed. And I'm like, why is this suddenly a big deal to you at age 24 that they have never really told you what this scar is about? Like, it didn't make any sense. Now, overall, Mickey was just frustrating me because by the time the second love interest comes in, who is connected to Nadia, like, it just felt so rushed. I feel like there was all this buildup for them to have sex, and then the sex scene was a mess too. It was like Isaac Newton and smashing cake, and it was not good. I am actually confused as to how the editor from Red Tower read this and then decided she should write a romantasy, because this was the most recent book that she had out when she was offered to write a romantasy story. And neither of the romances were hitting in this book. So I'm gonna get into the last one, but I had to take a break because these toxic things like just got on my nerves so bad, and I'm like, okay, I need a breather before I hop into another Rachel book. So I ended up reading Honeysuckle and Bone. This one is by Trisha Tobias. I had received this in mail from Zando Books last month, and this was actually better than I expected, especially like as an IP book. Now there were like one or two things I'm just like, I'm not sure that's really how it would go. But it even had some of the twists that like they were kind of similar to these toxic things, but done better. So basically in Honeysuckle and Bone, we follow this girl. She just graduated high school. She's coming to Jamaica with a secret, having taken the place of her friend who was supposed to be an au pair for a wealthy family. Now, the friend was wealthy herself. Like, she constantly had money. This friend would do stuff for her and buy her things all the time. So it didn't make any sense to me that she would go to Jamaica to be an au pair. And just like the idea of having an au pair from the US as a Jamaican family didn't make any sense to me, just because my mom did nanny work in the Caribbean when she was younger. Like, she moved from Guyana to Trinidad to work for wealthy families. So that's not the part I'm disagreeing with. I just think like they would probably sooner take in like a nanny from a smaller island if the local ones aren't working versus somebody coming from America who really doesn't need a nanny job. And I had to kind of just like suspend my belief for that part, because I'm like, that feels like a symptom of like this being an IP project, and they might have had a whole different setting in mind before they chose to author. But we have this girl, she comes to Jamaica with all these secrets. Nannies have like who have worked for this family have all been scared away. They're trying to figure out what's going on. They believe there's a duppy in the house. And so they're trying to unravel the mystery of this duppy and why all these nannies have been scared away. She is of Jamaican descent, but she really doesn't know too much about Jamaica, having never visited before. So like that's a whole thing too. I laughed because like one of the things that happens early on is like they ask her about like beef patties, and they're like, oh, which is your preference? And she's like, I didn't know there was like a brand competition going on between them. And I'm like, that's how I felt when I was in Jamaica. Like, they were like, oh, did you prefer this kind or this kind? I'm like, wait, there's different kinds? Like, I thought y'all like were all making them from scratch. And it's like, no, there's like this brand and there's this brand. I'm like, I didn't know it was a franchise. So that was like very funny to me and very relatable. I thought this was pretty atmospheric. I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a thriller or a horror. I would say it's like a paranormal with a mystery in it. And I enjoyed piecing together what was going on. I thought the cast was pretty well done and had good chemistry together. And I thought that it felt very realistic as a teen story, because a lot of times like lately when I pick up a YA, like there's this high concept, but it really feels better suited for adult. Like, realistically, this could be something that happens to a teen who just graduated high school, outside of the whole like being haunted by ghosts part. ER Doc's Las Vegas Reunion. So this one I've had on my shelf since around this time last year. It is by Denise N. Wheatley, and it's a Harlequin medical romance. So I had read like one Harlequin medical romance before, but I can't remember, like really recall what that one was about. So this was kind of my intro to Harlequin medical romance, because I usually read like Harlequin intrigue, and I used to read Desire when they had Desire, and I could read a couple of their other books. So if you are really into like the medical romances where like they have a lot of hospital stuff going on and there's like a lot of jargon, this is like right up your alley. So as the title suggests, like there's a reunion in Las Vegas between some ER docs. So basically we follow Dr. Eva Gordon, and she is from small town Iowa. She was engaged to this man who was running for senator. Like, she's super excited about planning the wedding, and he's just like, you know what, I'm out, I can't do this anymore. Breaks up with her because he wants to focus on his run. She is distraught. She sees this ad saying, come to Las Vegas and work at Fremont General, really great opportunity for like a temporary position. So she goes to get away from it all and experience some new things. Like, this is big city life. You see a lot of crazy stuff going on in the hospital. what she didn't expect is to see her former friend, Dr. Clark Malone. They went to medical school together, and he had a crush on her. She had feelings for him too. They ended up sleeping together, but she wasn't trying to like make anything serious because she's like, I'm focused on my career, baby. So they end up graduating and losing touch. So this is their big reunion, and they decide to kind of have a friends with benefits situation to see how things go. So this is a pretty quick and easy read if that's something that you're looking for. And overall, I had a pretty decent time with it. It wasn't my favorite Harlequin romance, but it wasn't like a bad one. It was kind of just like an average one. Finally, let's talk about the last one by Rachel Housel Hall. So, like I mentioned these toxic things earlier. I had watched like a interview with Rachel where she was talking about this, and basically, like a couple of years ago, she had directly been reached out to by Liz, who runs Entangled. She's the CEO, but she's also the editor for Red Tower, which is just interesting to me. Like how you're the CEO, but you're also the editor, and you wouldn't have like another editor on your team, especially with such a fast-growing imprint. And like she's had read her work, and she wanted her to write a romantasy. Now, at the time that she would have reached out to her, her latest book would have been These Toxic Things. So, and These Toxic Things initially got some good buzz because it was like one of the Amazon first reads because it's with Amazon Publishing. So a lot of people were talking about it, and she's already a long established author, bestseller, has been in the game since like 2002, I believe. All that to say, that doesn't necessarily mean that just because you are a long-term writer that you can genre hop. Like, that is just something that in my writing groups we've talked about, how people are just genre hopping to fit what's trendy. And so it's interesting to see like somebody who's not a newer author genre hop, and they genre hop just based off of somebody reaching out to them versus like having this idea and properly developing it. And you can tell this idea wasn't properly developed, and that she was learning how to write fantasy as she went along. This is very 2000s like YA fantasy coded, and I like 2000s like early 2010s YA fantasy. And I can say that because I am currently reading this one right here, which is a 2010 like YA fantasy series. So reading the last one, and like we have this main character who is just trying so hard to be witty, it felt a lot like that. But like I said, it felt try hard. Whereas in like the Campion Chronicles, it feels a little more natural. It makes a little more sense in a high school setting. This is set in a secondary world. So right off the bat, it was very jarring to me because we see like modern AAVE from the first line, a very memeable phrase from the first line, and that kind of like took me out, and I had to close this book and shut it and wait a little bit to come back to it because I'm like, ooh, I cannot. But since I already own a copy, shout out to the fam, I was like, I am going to read this and get through it. I'm not going to DNF because this book costs money. Like, I don't even care. Like, I wasn't even really like looking at the edges and stuff. I haven't even taken the hardcover off to see what it looks like underneath. I was just like, I know this one costs money. I am going to read it. And I was curious about it just because there is not a lot of black romantasy out right now. But it was very 2000s coded. We start with Kai. She wakes up to this white woman stealing from her and like chasing her down through the village. like a series of unfortunate events happen. She almost ends up in jail. Instead of going to jail, she has to pay off her debt by doing these odd jobs, and she has to live with the same white girl who stole from her. And that was just very bizarre to me. Like, Kai is very different. She doesn't remember who she is, which is one of Rachel's go-to tropes if you've read her thrillers. She loves a main character who has memory loss so that she can just write whatever and fill in the blanks. For somebody who has memory loss, Kai remembers a lot of stuff that doesn't need remembered. Like, she remembers the most random things like rum and cake and sex, and she just has a lot of personality for somebody who doesn't remember who he is. It does not add up, and it is very weird because, like, she's like so confident and sure of herself, and it's like, this is how this is supposed to be, this is how this is supposed to be, but at the same time she doesn't know who she is, and she's trying to fill in the blanks. And we go on this journey of her trying to fill in the blanks. She decides that she needs to be the warrior for this sickly people in this town of people who are really nasty to her right off the bat. And I just never understood why. I'm like, why do we care about these white people? They were rude to you. The love interest shows up like pretty much right away. He is the brother of the white woman who stole from her, who she ends up living with. It's literally love at first sight, like, or not necessarily love at first sight, it's lust at first sight. Like, immediately she wants him. We're told he's so beautiful, and he's white, of course, and so like the flaxen hair and whatever stuff, he's so beautiful. And she actually finds out that she has the ability to hear people's thoughts. So like the whole time she's reading his thoughts, and he's like insta lusty for her too. And throughout the book we get a lot of heavy flirting with them. Like, we would get battle scenes and like info dumping of the world and like little tidbits, and then we would just switch right back to flirting scenes between them. Heavy flirting scenes between them. And a lot of the flirting scenes between them were innuendos about swordplay. There's only so many times you can make sword jokes in a book. And so it was very weird because this secondary world is like typical Dungeons and Dragons, medieval Europe style fantasy world. But she's super sassy, and she's using a lot of modern language that it didn't connect for me. And I started listening to the audiobook as I was reading along, because I'm like, okay, I need the audiobook to get into this. And I usually don't even like fantasy audiobooks, so that said something. But I will say the narrator tried to do the best that she could. She was switching up the voices and stuff, but I think that even made it even more jarring. Like, you go from like old English to like modern day, and this is not a portal fantasy. Lore of the Wilds had the same problem to an extent, and I need authors to embrace portal fantasy or write urban fantasy if you want to like write that type of language, because this amalgam doesn't work. With portal fantasy, you can get away with it because you can have it in the modern day, but then you can also go to the portal and go to ye olde whatever place. So I had a hard time understanding what the plot was really, because like you have the synopsis really like is a confusing mess. It doesn't really tell you what's going on. And like they're going on this journey, and you understand that Kai needs to figure out who she is, but it just felt like the stakes weren't high enough. And we're getting like all this dumping of new places and new people. The one that they're talking about in the title, with the last one, we didn't even start hearing about the one until the 60% mark, which was insane to me. Just like with these toxic things, it felt like we were getting information about things that like you're paying close attention because you're like, this may come in handy and may be important, but at the end of the day it's really not impacting anything. Like, it was very confusing. It was hard to stay interested. This was super slow burn. And one of the worst things about this romance, in addition to like we would go from finding some random to flirting, was that like the flirting would be like, okay, and we're kissing, and I'm dipping my hand in his pants, and then they would get interrupted and have to stop. That happened over and over again, and I'm like, either do it or get off the, like, or don't. Like, it didn't make any, like, you can't do that either so many times. There's only but so many times you can have these constant interruptions with a couple during a story, especially if they really don't have a basis for the romance to begin with. Like, in order for that tension to be there and for it to work, you have to have a reason to want to see them together. And because it was so instant, like, lust between them, we didn't get that. And just so much of the dialogue in here was just really, really, really cringy. Like, I'm gonna see if I can pull up a screenshot for you guys, or like to just read like one of the things I read here, because it was like the dialogue was not good at all, and it was actually making me like get secondhand embarrassment. Okay, so I scoff at the idea of me being a mediocre lover. I'm pretty sure that I'd make the man on this bed of hay forget his own name. Sorry, Chaos, I say to the broadsword. It's not you, but it's not me either. But look how big and wide that blade is, Jaden says, smirking. I roll my eyes. It's always about size, isn't it? I point the broadsword at him. I don't know if anyone's ever told you this, but just because it's big and wide doesn't mean it's good. Is that so? Jaden says. Yes, that is extremely so. He narrows his eyes. Didn't you just say that you're open to new experiences? I am open, but I didn't mean like that. That was like every few pages, those types of jokes. Sorry, my battery died because I've been filming for a while. But yeah, we were going through things, and slowly she's getting her memory back, and things still weren't really connecting for me while I was reading. This just felt very disjointed. It I would be curious to see or if she's read any recent fantasy at all before she jumped into writing this, because it didn't feel like that. I don't feel like the fantasy was parts were well developed. I don't feel like the romance part was well developed, and I see why the reviews are as bad as they are, because there wasn't really much to enjoy here. Like, everything was just really, really messy, and we just like needed to go back completely to the drawing board and try again. So I will not be reading the rest of this trilogy. I believe it's a trilogy. I really couldn't get through. I really could barely get through this. I may try Shanora Williams' book from Red Tower when that comes out in the fall, just because she has actual experience writing in that fantasy romance realm, and I've heard people say good things about her stuff. But this one didn't do it for me. And after having read a few books by Rachel now, she's not the author for me. Like, I just expect so much more from a veteran author as far as storytelling capability that she's not bringing to the table for me. So currently I am reading The Bodyguard's Deadly Mission by Lisa Dodson. Just started it today, hoping to finish it over the next 2 days. And as I mentioned before, I'm reading Burning Emerald. This is like something I'm doing slowly, so I don't know if I'll finish it this month or next month. And then there were a couple books that I had put on my TBR that I want to get to within the next week. So let me know if you've read any of these books that I've read in this video. And if you like this video, make sure and hit that like button. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!